incredible work. You wrote the initial report with Jeff Passan for ESPN. As the Mets and baseball grapple with this sexual harassment, how did you hear Sandy Alderson, Mets president, yesterday?
Tony, I have complicated feelings about what he said, and I think who bears responsibility in all of this. I think it is reasonable for the Mets to have not known, which is a question that's been raised, because unless we hear that people in positions of power or that were interviewed or should have been interviewed had awareness of the incident, there's no way, frankly, that they could have found out. But I thought Hannah Keyser at Yahoo asked a really important question at the press conference. She asked Alderson, did you talk to any women? And he said no, because there aren't women that we would have talked to in positions of power. And I think that's an indictment, not of the Mets necessarily, but of the industry at large, because fundamentally this is a story about power and power imbalances. And if there's greater diversity, gender and race, in these positions, I think there are people who are more likely to understand those dynamics and explore them. So going forward, this isn't just about the Mets or one person. I think this is a structural issue that baseball needs to address, and that seems to me to be a good place to start.
Alderson said it's the club's responsibility. It's not baseball's responsibility. It's not a business's responsibility. How did that sit with you?
I actually disagree. I think it's more than the responsibility of them. Like, it would be naive for anyone to think this is constrained to one person, one club, or one even sport or league. This is an issue that, as women come forward and tell similar stories, clearly is, I would say, it spreads across all of sports and industry. And I think it's not just the Mets that need to look at this and think, okay, how can we prevent this from happening in the future? It's every team, it's the league, and it includes coaches, executives, and athletes.
Mm-hmm. Emily Kaplan, your thoughts on Alderson's comments yesterday and anything else you want to go here?
Yeah, when I heard him talk, one of the things that worried me was that he was minimizing the prevalence of this. And, Tony, you and I were talking yesterday. I think one thing I really want my colleagues to understand is there's not always a graphic text message. There are so many women in this industry who have been forced out because of casual misogyny that happens on a daily basis. My friend, Meredith Shiner, she used to cover politics in D.C. She brilliantly coined it subconcussive hits. Like, we don't see them happening, but they're happening, and they grate on women, and they make them feel unwelcome in sports. So, yeah, Mina, I totally heard that Hannah Keyser question yesterday in the press conference, and I felt like it was spot on. And then to hear Sandy Alderson say, no, we haven't talked to any women, that's all I need to know, both about the process and just about how much this actually is on people's minds as they're making hire, which is none. It's non-existent.
So I'll ask you the same question then. You've covered teams before. Now you're covering a full league, and you get to see all teams in play here. When you hear a team president say, "This is our responsibility. This is not something baseball needs to look at here," how do you feel about that?
Again, I'm conflicted, but I do think that when you're hiring someone to be the GM of your franchise, that's the leader. That's a forward-facing person. It's on you to vet them and to absolutely talk to zero women whatsoever and to broaden your scope. Don't just talk to executives. Talk to the people who deal with them every day. This guy was clearly a source for a lot of baseball reporters based on the inferences I took off of Twitter. Talk to people. Find out his true character. That's on you.
Clinton Yates?
Well, also, once a mistake is made and it's happened on your watch, there's no need to distance yourself from it as if you were somehow not responsible for it. He sounded like a person trying to insult my intelligence as an American, as a man, never mind a baseball fan. If you're telling me it's not systemic, well then how does this happen? How do you sit in that position and tell everybody that you didn't interview a woman? What is systemic other than that? And that's what I don't understand about this. You can come out and say, this was messed up. We need to do something different, and we're responsible for our own situation. To say and distance yourself, this isn't one club's problem. I don't care who he thinks his responsibility is. What I care about is whether or not what happens on his watch is something that he can take responsibility for, and it doesn't seem that that's the case, which is how all these different types of men in these positions end up bifurcating the responsibility at the end of the day. Bro, it was your guy. Obviously, it is systemic to your team enough that that person got to the top. You don't have to lambaste every single other person on earth in order to take responsibility for yourself. I didn't get that from what he said.
There's many things that could be true here, and this infraction, allegedly, occurred when he wasn't with the Mets. Mina, I want to just ask you, is there anything else you want to add here?
I think I just want to echo what Emily said about, it's not just about the fact this is a very concrete case. We had text messages. It's very clear what happened, and often the stories are, and first of all, most of the time we never even hear the stories, but they're less clear. There's more confusion, or there's more reasons for people to plant seeds of doubt. But beyond that, this is so far from being an isolated incident. Every woman in this industry I know was not surprised. Not about this particular person, but the fact that this kind of story happened. And that should tell you something, I think, about the prevalence of these types of interactions in not just baseball, but every sport.